May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cover with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So I think before us we have two things. We have a question, and related to that question is the topic, Vedanta, science and worship. And the inference of the topic is, how do these all connect? So, as with any topic, we have to understand what these words mean. And we could almost say that Veda and science are the same. Because science, that word comes from skio, and that means knowledge, to know. It's a search to know things. But it's normally taken to be objective things. And Veda also comes from the root vid, which means also to know and to see. And so that is also a concern, naturally, with everything that is to be known, including objective things. But when you put anta on the end of it, that is the end, that is the finality, the final conclusion. Where does all this lead to? We have what is called Vedanta, that is the essence of truth, or the ultimate truth, or the end of our search. So the end of the search in science, the end of the search in any objective search for something to be known, will ultimately result in a higher knowledge, what is described as paravidya, higher knowledge, as opposed to aparavidya, lower knowledge, no knowledge comprising just about everything else except that by knowing which we can know everything. Now, in this modern age, it's unfashionable somehow, certainly in developed countries, well, Europe and America and so on, maybe not so much America, but certainly in Europe. And it is unfashionable to use this word God or to bring up religion, granted, particularly amongst the younger people. It is estimated that children that grow up with a stylized, organized religion, with religious ideas of doctrine and dogma and so on, by the age of 15 will have abandoned that. And there are a couple of reasons probably for it. One reason in this day and age is the increase in the use of technology. In technology, we become much more material-minded. And when we become material-minded, the deeper questions evade us. Because we're dealing with the surface things, thinking all the solutions on the surface, and everything residing in matter. I'm going to give you a little science now, though. Because from the science point of view, modern science point of view, and I say modern science point of view because there is ancient science also that has come to the same conclusions that we have gotten maybe in the last century up to now. And don't forget, all our discoveries are on the shoulders of giants, is the expression. People worked hard to understand the fundamentals that we take for granted. Electricity, for example. Well, this didn't come all of a sudden. People had to look into it. So we see an increasing knowledge with increasing instrumentation as well. Instrumentation, which is so outlandishly gigantic to be maybe a kind of waste of money. Namely, for example, there's the controversy surrounding the large Hadron Collider crossing the French-Swiss border, and there things are spinning around or pushed around in a kind of particle traffic accident to see what we can come up with without understanding high velocity particle physics. What is, high acceleration? What is the fallout? In the old days, there was a bubble chamber where you could trace, oh, here's an electron. Not that you ever saw an electron, but you could see where it traveled. You could see what it left behind. A little like an airplane, that leaves a trail behind it. And you may not see the airplane, but you'll see the trail. Now, the ancient days of Upanishads, and this is what we follow when we talk about Vedanta, were not really too concerned with this subject of God. God and religion was not a primary concern. I don't think it was even a concern at all. Never mind primary. Because things were approached in a systematic way using a same methodology as you use to establish objective truth. Objective truth, even though that may be so subtle that we cannot see it. There is nobody here who has seen an electron. There's nobody here who's seen a so-called quark. And nobody's examining why is a quark never seen by itself? Why does it have to come in a group of three? And is it really something? Or is it a mathematical construct? A kind of concept that can be used because a lot of data was produced and there was a kind of movement, a thrust, an enthusiasm toward complicating things rather than simplifying things. If you take the very tiniest level of our physics, for example, then you will see that the simplicity that was there in the early part of the 20th century, namely that there was an atom. From 1905, it was understood. And that atom has a kind of nucleus. And conceptually, we can imagine it something like a planetary system with a heavy thing in the middle, proton, and then a vague kind of thing on the outer border, making kind of satellite. And then neutrons were also discovered. So we know the nucleus was protons, neutrons, and then electrons. The electron hasn't changed. Maybe there are some heavier versions of it, so muons and tau and so on and so forth. We're not going into all of that. But for practical purposes, this is what we have. Now, these are structural descriptions and structural problems because the more interesting question is, why doesn't the electron sit on the proton? And how far away is the proton from the electron from the proton? If you take a big soccer field or a big sports field, and you have some very, very tiny thing, maybe a small coin or something, that represents the proton. The electron is sitting on the outer edge of the field, let's say 100 meters away. So that is the scale. So there are some amazing things which are just taken for granted. And these are questions, many questions to do with modern science that are not answered. To young people, we don't talk to them about God. Why should we avoid the subject? Well, because, see, the arrangement of the topic is Vedanta, science, worship, and worship. And worship comes as a topic last, but we have to understand what is the fundamental first before we get to the worship and the idea or the concept of a God, a personal God, a God that has the standard qualities of omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence, that kind of thing, that has been the subject of attention for all religions from the beginning of time throughout the world. Now, one difficulty, of course, which has always been there, and that is that something which is steady and never changes is a kind of supreme reality. Now, you can take this in one of two ways. One thing you can do is you can say, well, maybe there's nothing. So you see these ancient rishis who had a scientific mind, who wanted to investigate what the truth is, that is, the unchanging behind the changing. They had a technical language for it. They noticed that everything in the universe, including bodies and trees and winds and clouds and suns and so on, everything changes. And when you consolidate this into one single existence, something like a universe, the technical term is jagat. That is the thing that changes. and compared to something like a tree, vriksha, a tree, something that can be cut down. So something that is not only changing, but something that is finite, something that can come, can go, has no permanence, and a world represented where there are no permanent habitats. Even the body is not a permanent habitat. And a cosmic body is not a habitat. A planet is not a permanent habitat. There are no permanent habitats. Now, how to figure all of this out? Well, we have to go back and see what were the ancient sages doing. They were examining the changing nature of things and asking the same questions we're asking now. The Chandogya Upanishad, in the 6th chapter, gives us some interesting suggestions. Not just suggestions, but questions and answers. Now, these are answers that actually 5-year-olds can produce. But the questions are all adult questions. And today, if we don't answer them correctly, as a child answers them, then we are stuck with the stupidity of adulthood. A kind of education system that makes you more and more distant from what is real in an effort to make things highly complex. But the simple questions require simple answers. Now, that whole 6th chapter in the Chandogya Upanishad will begin with a story of a student. A lot of the Chandogya Upanishad will be to do with wonderful, wonderful students. And here is one, Shvetaketu. So, Om Shvetaketu Haroneya Asa, it goes off like that. There was Shvetaketu, Aruneya. Now, his father had said to him, so you live the life of a religious student. It's assumed that from 12 to 24, you go through a studentship in residence, a kind of, not exactly a boarding school, but you go with a kindly teacher and his wife, and you're taught all the subjects of the day. You learn everything that the modern science of its day had to offer. And that was considerable. There's a wonderful book which is called Vedic Physics. And there, the person, the author, has gone into a great deal of trouble to investigate the Aparavidya side of the Vedas, the cosmology and physics contained in the Vedas. I know we all think that the Vedic mantras are all like psalms, they're all in praise of deities, and this is perfectly true. But what is behind this praise? Now, since it is very difficult to get the unchanging and put it into a category, because it's the source, the 9th chapter, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita will say that the supreme reality, or you can call it God if we like, is beyond the range of thought. Words come back together with the mind, says the Upanishads. And so we can never see with the human eyes this. We can never put God in as an object and test, is it alkaline or acidic? What is the pH of God? How can we put it into a test tube, shake it up and analyze? If there was a God like that, we would have to look for another God, because we are looking for a subject, not an object. That's the difficulty. And when God is presented as an object, as maybe some religions will do, that is suitable up to a certain age. Beyond that, it's no longer suitable. And science and technology on the surface material things, all come into play so that it seems, and peer pressure also assists, that it is irrational to talk of something that is characterized as a medieval tyrant sitting in the heavens. And there are, since the 1970s onwards maybe, adamant evangelical atheists who have pushed this agenda that God is just an illusion and a delusion. And nobody examined, but what about the world? Is the world also not a delusion? Then which delusion is the real delusion? Now we are tying ourselves up into circular language. So we cannot see this unseen. However, we can see its glories if, and only if, we understand, as Vedanta does, that what we call that supreme is not only the efficient cause, that is a kind of creator, but also the material cause. It is from its own essence that it comes out. And so, how we get there is by developing a worshipful attitude. We'll come on to that later. And that is to develop an appreciation for things in depth that live and move and breathe. In other words, the whole of life. And if we have an interest in that and a curiosity in that, it is called science. But where that science will lead us is to something that is moving it, something that is behind it, something that is acting as a substratum and manifesting itself, not for something separate from it. So we have three choices in our outlook. We can have one choice which says there is nothing, non-existence, and then nothing made everything out of nothing. We'll come to the absurdity of that shortly. Second thing will be that ex nihilo, that from nothing there was a creator God, extra cosmic to us, that made something, created something, ex nihilo, out of zero. Well, religions may have taught this. I think certainly the Roman Catholic Church would have invented this ex nihilo concept. We can't blame them entirely because every religion has this kind of thing. But you see, there is a third option. The third option is that something made everything out of itself. And so what we call the universe is the corpus, if you will, of what we call God. It's not disengaged from it. It is part and parcel of it. It is everything that we see is a wonderful display of the glory, manifested glory, of that being that holds everything in a sense of rhythm, harmony, with laws that modern science is studying. Now, he's lived, this is Shvetaketu, the life of a religious student because all studies were that religious studies. So, and truly, my dear, there is no one in our family who is unlearned in the Vedas. Who is somebody who's entitled to learn everything possible, somebody who is privileged to learn, maybe a Brahmana by birth. And so, in this conversation, there's a Brahma Bandhu. It says, he who calls Brahmanas his relatives, but doesn't himself behave like a Brahmana is what's being referred to. Shankaracharya puts it as Brahmanan Bandhu Vyapadi Shati Naswayam Brahmana Vritti Iti. That is, somebody who is called a Brahman, is related to Brahmana is his ancestry, but doesn't behave in this way. So, having become a pupil at the age of 12, he returns to his household, to his father at the age of 24, and having studied all the Vedas, he was greatly conceited. Are this echoes of modern people? Yes. We think we know everything. We think we have technology at our fingertips, and certainly anybody who wants to look anything up, even the passage I've quoted, can just go to this source of all eternal wisdom called Google and get the answer. So it's natural that in one time we can look down our noses at those who we feel are inferior in their concepts. And theists often are put into that class. And the theists themselves haven't helped the situation because they have stuck with concepts where, in the language of Swami Vivekananda, rituals, books, temples, churches, doctrines, dogmas, and made them primary instead of secondary details, as Swami Vivekananda puts it. But what is the primary thing? That each soul is potentially divine. If you know this, how will your self-confidence look? How will your demeanor change? How will you be able to shift your attitude in such a way that you glide across the border of all so-called problems, taking them as mere hurdles that can be easily overcome once we know that we are equipped to overcome them? So it's natural that knowledge makes us conceited. Knowledge puffs us up because we have this dictum, I know. In other words, you don't. If I say I am wise, it means you're all foolish. So, thinking himself well-read, he was arrogant. And his father then said to him, the wonderful story, Shvetiketu, since you are now so greatly conceited, think yourself well-read and arrogant, did you ask when you were there doing your study for a certain instruction? A certain instruction. What was that instruction? Yana shrutam shrutam bhavati amatam matam. He goes, by which, what is that? By which the unheard or the unhearable becomes heard. The unperceivable becomes perceived. The unknowable becomes known. I imagine all our knowledge is in this category. It is something that we perceive, something that we hear, and something also that we parrot. If you ask any student, tell me, how did this universe begin? They'll talk about a Big Bang, a kind of fireball that cannot go anywhere because if you have an explosion, then nothing will ever run into each other. You can try it, you can see a hand grenade explodes and all the pieces fly off, disassociated from every other piece. That means that nothing in the universe can ever run into anything else, and then we cannot form stars and galaxies. And any cosmological model that doesn't have stars and galaxies is considered maybe not to be such a good model. I think you have to have it. And so how do you solve the problem? You put in ad hoc things. You have to have this fireball, a small pimple on the end of it, and that inflates faster than the speed of light at incredible speed. And then you've done away with so many difficulties and problems. But then you see, when you get radiation from that, we know that the effects of radiation come out as 50% matter, 50% antimatter. It annihilates each other in the laboratory and you have nothing, zero. So how do you deal with that? Well, you invent some particles. You allow two types of protons and one decays faster than the other, matter and antimatter, and you're left with the residue, and we are just the residue. Now the problem is that for years and years, they tried to make the proton decay and it doesn't. Anyway, it doesn't matter, we'll make it do it. So you see, all of these are difficulties, but learned and parroted, and no one's inquiring, was there such a thing? Now there may be, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me as if it's a very good tried and tested theory when you have to patch it up so much, so badly, and has to rest on an ad hoc insertion called inflation. So thinking cosmologists, astrophysicists, mathematicians, etc., are now seeing the problems and trying to find different ways. One way is some version of a cyclical universe. Now we come back to the Vedas. This is exactly what the rishis had, a cyclic universe. In other words, it's perpetual. It goes on. It never stops. And after eons of years, Carl Sagan, the great cosmologist, remarked, or astrophysicist remarked, that only the Hindus have a realistic view of the evolution, if you will, or the time frames of the universe. Now you see, with more technology, we're peering into the universe and finding clouds of hydrogen. The Hubble deep field exercise did it, and discovering hydrogen that should not be there, vast clouds of hydrogen that should not be there. And the James Webb telescope is peering in and finding galaxies that are older than the purported age of the universe. What to do? The important thing is that just as we require fresh, original thinking, even in the area of religion and the area of the deeper questions, we also have to have the same inquiry with regards to the science as it is in all its various realms, not just the technology that is used, but why that technology is there. So we have today in modern science many more questions than answers. And many of these questions are just ignored. So to teach students fresh thinking is the role of a good teacher. To shake things up and say, history tells us that those who went against the grain of conventional group thinking, consensus thinking, never discovered anything new. Why not think in a fresh way? And we have the capacity to do it, because within us is an area, as it were, that has access to broader thinking than just our own brain cells. We'll explain. So, what can there be that is not perceived? What can there be that is not heard of, where you parrot something? And what is the thing that is unknowable, that you can never know in an objective way through the eyes and the ears and so on? Well, how, Venerable Sir, can there be such a teaching? Yata sumya ekanamrit pindina sarvam brahmayam vijnatam sya. Just as, my dear, here comes the answer. By one clod of clay, all that's made of clay becomes known. The modification being only a name arising from speech, while the truth is that it is just clay. If you know some clay, you'll know everything made from clay. The potter goes, you see a potter fashioning things from clay. You come back 30 minutes later, to your surprise, you'll find figurines, cups, plates, different kinds of things, but all made from the same clay. And if you ask the clay, who are you in truth? If it is wise, it will say, I'm clay. And if you ask the figurine, who are you? It will be absurd for the figurine to say, I am an elephant form. I'm fashioned in the form of an elephant. My name, elephant. My form is like an elephant. But my substance is clay. Did you not know that? We have been looking at all the different forms, but not necessarily the substance. Now there's a great move toward something called theory of everything. This has just been put in a text, thousands of years old. This theory of everything, that there is only one substance. That's your theory of everything. And you won't find it in matter. That's the thing. That's the unfortunate thing. You won't find it in matter as we normally think of it. Particular things, individual things, you won't find it there. You won't find it in the figurines. You won't find it in the names. You won't find it in the forms. And so the term is vikara, modification or manifestation. The change is only nominal. And the Upanishad here suggests that all modifications are based on one thing, the reality of clay, and not that change rests simply on a word. That's just a mere name. Now, coming back to the questioner, what do you do with thinking people? Make them think. Ask them, do you think that this world is unchanging? Surely you see that it's changing. Did you know that from 1905, according to the great, great physicist Einstein, he said that from here on, matter, materialism is dead. It's gone, it's been dispatched. It's replaced by energy. Now, in something like 1895, 96, Swami Vivekananda was at a party held by Sarah Bernhardt. His friend Nikola Tesla was there, and he asked Tesla, you know, our ancient yogis, they believe that there's only one thing, and that is energy. That matter, what looks like matter, is just energy. I'm not sure if he put it like this. He probably didn't say energy, because in those days it was force. Can you come up with some kind of formula that will show evidence for it? And apparently Nikola Tesla didn't do it, because 10 years later, and Minerva Einstein was there, and she was probably co-author to this appendix of special relativity, which was there in 1905, this famous equation that all of us know, and that is that E equals m. You forget about the c squared, it's not really in there, but E equals m. In other words, the equation says that everything is potential energy, everything. That the only thing that makes things heavy is energy. The only thing that gives something mass is energy. Now, the curious thing about energy is it has to follow conservation law. That is, it cannot be created. Now, something that is actual is something that is activated. And if energy is not activated, and nobody knows what energy is, Richard Feynman, the great physicist, he declared, we don't know what energy is. And we still don't know. We know what it does. So where is it coming from? If it is not actual, then we only have one other choice. That is, it is apparitional. That's your only choice. You have no other choice. If it's not actual, and if it seems to be real, then we only have one choice. This is apparitional. So when somebody writes a book like, for example, God Delusion, there should be another book which says World Delusion. And these ancient people found it. Now, it's not that nothing exists. There is clay, according to this example. So he says, Yata sumya ekana loha manina, just as, my dear, by one nugget of gold, all that is made of gold becomes known, the modification being only a name arising from speech, while the truth is that it is just gold. You cannot have gold and a ring. You can melt all the gold you like and you still come to gold. So these are good examples. And just as, my dear, by one pair of nail scissors, all that is made of iron becomes known, metal, objects that are used for a function, the modification being only a name arising from speech, while the truth is that it is just iron. And so, my dear, is that teaching. Nave nunam bhavantas tad edad aviduso. Truly, those venerable people didn't know this when I was at school. For if they'd known it, why wouldn't they have told me? So please, you tell me now. You're a wise person. And his father concedes, so be it, my dear. Why? Because without this, what's the use of the rest? If you don't know the foundation, the theory of everything, what's the use? You're just dealing with the details and not the generalized overall. You haven't got the substance of it. So there is a primacy of being, but you have two choices. Either you have existence or you have non-existence. And this question is there. Sadeva samya idam agra asit ekam evadidityam. In the beginning, my dear, this was being alone, one only without a second. Now we have to reflect on that. Can you imagine anything without a second? Some people say, it's very important, some people say, many materialist scientists are saying this, in the beginning, this was non-being alone. Now, the current model of cosmology says this. In the beginning, there was a singularity, whatever that means. You have to have, if you go along with that, you have to understand things like black hole physics and so on, and nobody understands it. Anyway, they want nothing to make everything out of nothing. Here it's directly refuted. Some people say in the beginning, this was non-being alone, one only without a second. From that non-being, being was produced. Now there's a whole concept then of upadhi. So let us see where modification comes from. It requires something to funnel something else through. For example, we are sitting here, there are electrical lights on, that is, a bulb is necessary, that has to be connected in a way with a certain filament that will manifest electrical light, but it has to be tuned in, switched on at a wall where connections are made, and the connection is to a vast field, an electrical current, unseen, manifested as a spark, no doubt, if you manage to touch the wiring. You require an earth for it, because it's everywhere present. It's not located in a particular place. It's there in a whole electromagnetic field. It's omnipresent, if you will. So this light bulb is called upadhi. Now, if there's only one thing, like clay, if there's one without a second, where do we get all the manifested glory from? It's because we have to have adapters. What we call the name and form is an adapter. The sun is an adapter. The moon is an adapter. The earth is an adapter. Your eye is an adapter. Your body is an adapter. Your brain is an adapter. Your mind is an adapter. These are called upadhis. These are called limiting adjuncts, things which are close to it that restrict this form or that form. And so idam, this, the universe of name and form, that's what we are examining. The world of manifestation. Prior to manifestation, this world was what? Pure being. One without a second. And there's a logical priority, therefore, for this source, which technically is called Brahman. As the Brahman to the world is brought out by the statement that being alone was this. In the beginning, if there was a beginning. So prior to creation, as it were, all this was being, one only without a second. Name and form weren't there. And this statement is the statement to his son. So he doesn't have being as other things have being. He is his own being. Being is what we call God, not non-being. Now, if you take away these adapters, and there are two primary adapters, one is called time and one is called space. If you take time away, nothing moves. If you take space away, nothing exists objectively, because dividedness goes. Now, if you take away, therefore, dividedness, you don't have a non-thing. You have an undivided. If you take away change, you don't have a nothing. You have a changeless. If you take away borders and boundaries, things which are finite, you don't have a nothing, you have an infinite. Now, the beauty about this is this has explanatory powers. It has explanatory powers because how is it that the undivided, the unchanging, the infinite can appear to us as a divided thing in space? Well, it's very simple. If you want to see the change, you put time in, you put that dimension in, you put a limiting adjunct in, an adapter. If you want to see things in space moving out, if you want to know also how things are made small, or how things expand, how things fly off into space, get dispersed, then you have to put in space. It's as simple as that. So, if you take the undivided, how does it manifest itself? How does it give an explanatory power? There's one major player in this whole universe, and that is called gravity. Its key world is falling. In order to understand why that will be, we have to understand this will, if you wish, to be one without a second, to be undivided. Otherwise, what's the explanation for it? Why does there have to be such a thing called gravity? Why does there have to be such a thing called inertia? Why does there have to be such a thing called electrical energy? Why is there hydrogen at all? Why is it the primary element? If it is not for the fact that it is electrical, then why should there be an electrical energy? Now, all of these are very interesting questions, which remain with a question mark unless you take this approach. So, Vedanta understood it completely. And it says, it goes on, it says, but how indeed could it be thus? How could being be produced from non-being? It's an absurdity. Even a 5-year-old will tell you, you can't have nothing making everything out of nothing. It's only, and if you say, oh, no, this is how we think, you have to insert, of course, it's an adult thing. He says, on the contrary, in the beginning, this was being alone, one only without a second. And so, Tad Aikshatai continues, it thought. No. So the first activity is the activity of intelligent thought. On those basis, if you're looking at things more logically, how do you get intelligence from non-intelligence? If you cannot get being from non-being, existence from non-existence, how will you get intelligence from non-intelligence? How will you get consciousness from unconsciousness? Now, I don't know what the difficulty is in thinking other than this. It just astonishes me. So if young people, if young students and what have you, think that this universe is all that it is, they haven't thought deeply enough. And so far, we really didn't mention, except by way of convenience terms, this term God. We simply talked about an existent being. We talked about something that is existence itself. And you can go on consciousness itself. And you can go on bliss itself. That means if we access it, then there's no need for us to go through life in an unhappy, stressed way, thinking that all the other objects around us that you mentioned, such as compensating through eating, drinking, etc., will do any good. Because a fleeting problem will not be resolved with a fleeting remedy. So it's described like this. It thought, May I be many, may I grow forth. And it sent forth fire. Now, what do we mean by fire? Is it literally fire? Or is it something that produces heat, radiation? If you take the Big Bang seriously, then you can put it into here and say, yes, it made fire, a fireball. May I be many, may I grow forth. In other words, instead of from one single thing, let me manifest more and more and more, but I'm the one that's doing it. It is not an extra cosmic creator God supervising, where nature takes over by itself somehow. That philosophy was also there. It sent forth fire. That fire thought, may I be many, may I grow forth. It sent forth liquidity, water. And therefore, whenever a person grieves or perspires, well, at the end of it, from our point of view, water is produced from heat, from the fire, from heat. And then how does water? Water catches onto it. May I be many also. May I grow forth. And it sent forth what? Food. Without water, there's no food. There's no organic life. And therefore, whenever it rains anywhere, there is abundant food. So food for eating is produced from water alone. Now, all of these things, Tesham Kala Esham Bhutanam, all of these living beings, there are only three origins: those born from an egg, those born from living being, those born from a sprout. It now goes into biology. What a beautiful passage, from cosmology to biology. And then in the same theme, that divinity thought, well, let me enter into these three divinities by means of this living self. I myself entering into it. Let me then develop names and forms. And so you have all these different, multiple forms that we find on this planet Earth and everywhere else. The point is that this is entering into it. And so what are these various divinities and forms? Well, it is the discovery of what modern science has also discovered, but did it thousands of years ago. They had it all sewn up neatly. What did they have? They had two things: matter and energy. And of that, energy alone is there. The term for that was prana and akasha. Prana acts on akasha, and from akasha will come kinetic energy, and from kinetic energy will have radiation, and from radiation will come electricity, protons, electrons, and from that will come magnetism. Now, modern science, fairly modern science anyway, they put the two things together and made electromagnetism. And the one thing the ancient people left out was the nuclear forces, the so-called strong and weak forces, which may turn out, of course, certainly the weak forces, the weak nuclear energies will be variations, will come into electrodynamics, and the strong force may well come in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So I think the ancient people did a pretty good job. Now, how does this now answer our question about seeing their trend toward a disinterest in religion and its higher values? What should we do? Make them think in the lines of Vedanta, because Vedanta is not separate from science. And even the methodology that is being used to establish a kind of practical religion, the establishment of worship, for example, would be in a logical sequence. And we find all of this in the science of religion, as Swami Vivekananda describes it, in the practical, step-by-step process of logic contained in the Nyaya and put forward in what is called Raja Yoga. Let us look at it. How do we examine and verify that something is true? Credible authority has to be there. That is, somebody who says, I've taken a degree in something. Is there is there somebody in the inner world, that realm, who has taken the appropriate exams, who has passed the exams, and who knows all the answers? Yes. These are the great mystics, the great ones of intuition and higher knowledge, this Paravidya. And what is their methodology? We should examine that. If we don't follow the methodology, we're just armchair commentators. So, in Ramakrishna's language, some people have heard about milk, others have seen milk, others have tasted milk. It's only when you taste it that you know. So what is the methodology which is there? The methodology is the promotion of the higher values. Collectively, we call it sattva. And even these have to be transcended. Ramakrishna gives a story about that. A man going along gets waylaid by 3 robbers. These are the 3 gunas, the 3 components of nature. And they comprise they are the constituents of apparitional causation. Vivarta, we call it. In order for an apparition to take place, the reality must be hidden. Something else must be projected, and the possibility of finding out the truth must also be there. If you look in the distance and see a man with a hat, and you go closely and see it as a tree stump, then what happened? The tree stump itself was hidden. The man was projected in our vision and our imagination, and a close examination revealed it. This is a scientific methodology. So we follow the promotion of the higher values. And the robbers that waylay the man, the one says, let's rob him and kill him. And the other man says, no, we just tie him up. We rob him and tie him up. And the other one unties the man, leads him kindly to his house, looks after him, feeds him, consoles him. Won't you stay? No. The police will catch me. I'm also a robber. That also has to be transcended. This is sattva, rajas, and tamas. So we cultivate and train the rajas and tamas, these egoistic side of us, by promoting the higher values. And every spiritual teacher will tell you the same. Then the promise is there. Once you have gone through this experimentation, once you have shifted your mental framework, once you have saturated the mind with truth and goodness and beauty and love and harmony, what will happen? The truth will be revealed. The same Maya, which is twofold, a revealing version of it and a hiding version of it. It is the same Maya, this Mahamaya, that will reveal everything. So that is the methodology. Now that leads us then to how does Vedanta view the idea of a personal God, having said all this? Well, to start with, the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which comprises of an important threefold text for our Vedanta, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutras, will ask this question: if we deal with the thing which is unseen and impersonal and so on and so forth, will that lead us the way? Yes, that path will also be fine. But what about the ease of it? No, it's easier to do it in a different way. And what way will that be? Well, those who consecrate, make sacred all their actions to a personal God, Krishna says me, regarding me as the supreme goal, and who worship me, meditating on me with single-minded devotion, to them whose minds are thus absorbed in me, I very soon become the deliverer from the ocean of transmigratory existence, a continuous existence which is equivalent to death. And repeatedly, the method, Mayeva Mana, Adatsvamayi buddhim niveshaya nivesheshisha mayaiva ata udam na samsaya. Fix your mind. Fix your mind on me alone. Let your thoughts dwell on me. Hereafter you live in me alone. Of this, there's no doubt. And why would we do that? Because we have a sense of embodiment. The ancient sages may not have had such a sense of embodiment and followed a different path. But in this day and age, for young students and whoever, you have to rally the emotions around and steer it toward an atmosphere of worship that comprises the observation sufficient enough to arouse a sense of glory, to arouse a sense of wonder, adoration, and thankfulness in everything, away from the entertainment. Well, from the Vedanta point of view, we can say this. You see, God is spirit and he should be worshipped in spirit and in truth, says Swami Vivekananda. And we are all spirit, but that teaching is at the high end of understanding. We are all the clay or the gold. We're all one substance. And so, God is spirit. Does spirit live only in heaven? He asked this question. What is spirit? We are all spirit. Why is it we do not realize it, he says. What makes you different from me? Body and nothing else. Forget the body and all is spirit. But how can we forget the body? For those who have a feeling of embodiment, fix your mind on me, says Krishna. Now Brahman is the ultimate, and Brahman is associated with this one Upadhi, the mother of all Upadhis, and that is our collective ignorance. And the pursuit of science, the pursuit of Vedanta, is to remove this ignorance on every scale. So that is designated, this collective ignorance is designated by the Vedantists with one word, and you'll be surprised what it is. It's called Ishvara. That is the Upadhi. And it is also called Saguna Brahman, in contradistinction to Nirguna Brahman, which is beyond our concept. And that roughly responds really to what we would call a personal God, and the personal God that every and various religions have in mind. So the highest understanding is this one without a second. That is the clue. This one without a second is a non-dualistic approach. And so according to the non-dualistic Vedanta, the personal God seems to be one step lower than the absolute, than the Brahman. And but that means that he is the highest symbol of or manifestation of Brahman in the relative world. So Swami Vivekananda gives this definition: what is God? The highest reading of the human mind, or to the human mind, of the absolute. And we should take it, therefore, and use it. The highest symbol or manifestation of the relative world. And Ishvara, this Lord, this God, this personal God, is endowed with all those qualities: omniscience, omnipresence, universal lordship, unlimited power, and so on. Brahman cannot be described by any specific attribute. Some people say, what about Satchidananda? These are not attributes. These are substances. These are pure being is pure being. It's not becoming. So it's Ishvara and not pure Brahman who in his different aspects can be called the creator, the protector, the destroyer, the preserver, and so on. Any member of the Trinity, be it Christian or otherwise. So Ishvara or Saguna Brahman, with the help of Sattva, creates, with the help of Rajas, preserves, with the help of Tamas, destroys. He is the inner controller of the universe. And we find all the clues everywhere. Why do we feel that we exist? Because we are existence. It starts off with existence, not non-existence. Why do we want to work things out? It's because our nature is pure consciousness that comes out as intelligence. Why is it that we want to be happy? Because our nature is pure bliss. It has to be like that. You cannot have a tree without a preceding causal seed. And the seed and the tree is the same thing. It's just in a different mode. And so he is this inner control of the universe. The light of Ishvara that illumines the cosmic ignorance is the light of Brahman. And from the standpoint of pure Brahman, shifting to that, there's no creation. From the standpoint of Brahman, there are no attributes ascribed to itself. No attributes apply to Brahman. Attributes apply to this first upadi, which is this personal God. And just as gold without dross cannot be used for ornaments, you make an ornament from pure gold, it is so soft. It has to be alloyed with something. And so you alloy it with a proportion of silver or nickel or copper, depending. Otherwise, you can't understand what is this gold. And so that is the same. And without the dross of Maya, cannot create the universe. It has to have it. So Ishvara, as it were, is a corruption or deterioration from the Vedantic point of view of this pure Brahman. But it is the way. It is a sweet way. And it is not that Ishvara or the personal God is unreal. In a relative sense, yes. But we are living in a relative world and taking it as real. So this real entity, this manifested entity, playing the game of preserving and creating and dissolving, attach your mind to that, and therein comes worship. Mobilizing the emotions is the way. And since people are highly emotive in this day and age, you ask somebody, do you ever lose your temper? Are you ever angry? Somebody says, no, I don't. I think they're part of the AI business. They're probably a robot. So people have strong feelings. Isn't it better to take that energy that we call feelings and channel it in this way and get this response? So God is as real, is more real than anything else in this relative world. And is the last, I should say the first, limiting adjunct that manifests itself in the glory of this entire world. A significant portion of the Bhagavad Gita is dedicated to showing us the glory and beauty of this world. Because the more we appreciate it, the more we get closer to this reality where we merge into the ocean of divine bliss, which we call Brahman. Vedanta leads us there. Science also leads us there by making us understand the beauty and glory of this universe. And if we try to understand ultimately the why of it, because we are studying Maya, which is inscrutable, neither real nor unreal, then we'll never come to the end of it. There'll always be the questions in science and the pursuit of it. But we have to pursue it in such a way that we don't blindside us. We take the factual, interesting, curious facts of this universe, the components of this illusion, examine it and see how it opens up an understanding and realization of this divine. May we all do that. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be upon all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami. It was very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Swamiji.